Welcome to Inappropriate Growth, the podcast where we get real about the grind behind the glory. I'm Paul, your host, and I'm here to take you on a journey through the untold stories of business triumphs. We might raise some eyebrows, but it's all about the hustle and we don't fit the mold. Here we're talking about the kind of effort that doesn't just push the envelope, it shreds it to pieces. We're building a community where the norm is to defy norms. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the beginnings that were anything but humble. The times when giving up seemed like the only option. We'll also dig into all of those wild, insane, and out-of-the-box strategies that led to massive growth. From growth hacks to best practices, this podcast will be fast, furious, and should be a whole lot of fun. Join us as we redefine what it means to grow and turn business growth into an art form. Welcome to Inappropriate Growth.
Welcome back to Inappropriate Growth. Today we're turning up the volume with a very special guest who's no stranger to the world of radio. This entrepreneur is the voice that's been part of countless morning routines and the main man behind the mic at Planet 106.7 in South Louisiana. With over 2 decades in radio, he's not just an owner of a diversified media company, but he's also South Louisiana's favorite wedding reception DJ, ensuring every celebration hits the right note. From the studio to the aisle, he's the man who brings stories to life. And he's got a great story of his own. So please join me in welcoming the one and only Chris Logan. I hope you enjoy it.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 3 of Inappropriate Growth. Today, I'm very excited to have with me insufferable Chris Logan. Chris Logan he's part of the family. He's a local guy for me. He's well known because of the fact that he's an on-air personality and has been a DJ for quite some time in our market. Goodness, unlike my first 2 guests, one had a very thick Scottish accent, another had a very thick Cajun accent, and now I've got someone with the mellow, soothing, stereotypical radio voice. So,
but thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be a guest.
Well, I don't know where my idea to start a podcast came from, but the first person I knew that was actually doing that was you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I want to talk about because I knew you from being a DJ. We met a few years ago. I married into the family, and when we met, I just met the face to that voice that I knew that was the DJ locally for so many years, and I remember you were pretty excited about a move. You went from one radio station group to another radio station group, and it was a move you were very excited about. And right after you made that move, or shortly after, you found yourself completely unemployed and scrambling for something to do. Take me through that and tell me a little bit about what happened.
You know, for me, I've been in radio for a while. I worked for a couple different groups. I worked at one group probably for the longest, made a move from there, went to another local group. Then I made a move to go to another station. I'll just say at another larger group in our market. And I figured that was going to be the final stop for me. I'm like, man, if I can work at this, I'll call it the Heritage Station. Like, that would be cool. I'll grow into things, maybe move into certain spots. And I'm like, this is maybe where I'm meant to be for the long term. And then enter COVID, enter COVID, enter March 2020. And I started at this station, I think it was December of 2019. And then so March of 2020, I mean, everything changed. We could have a whole podcast about how everything changed with COVID. But March of 2020, we started working at home. I was doing my radio show from my house, and that lasted until whenever I was let go in October of 2021. So it was a company-wide mandate where only a handful of people, I think maybe like one from each station, someone could be there in the building. and they didn't want anybody there together. I mean, 6 foot apart, all that stuff. So they didn't want too many people in the building. So for this mass return of the company, they wanted everybody to be vaccinated. And, it was a big decision for me. And it was a decision that I felt was personal. For me, man, not to get into any health, health records or anything like that. But I had COVID twice, and luckily I made it through. Both times weren't bad. At the time, I knew I had antibodies, and because I was donating blood, and they would check for that. And so when they came down with this mandate to get vaccinated in order to come back to work, I declined. And they didn't want to do it. It was black or white, like you get it or you don't. And I'm like, well, we've been working at home for a year and a half. Can't we work home for another 5-6 months and just see what happens and see how this plays out? But it's not. And it wasn't a local decision. I mean, it was a corporate decision for the radio station,
right? And you can kind of tell company. Where we live, you could tell shortly after the COVID vaccine, you could really tell the difference between the companies where decisions were made locally and where decisions were made somewhere else. Like certain restaurant chains made you wait in your car and you had to put a mask on in between bites. Right. Other restaurants, the staff would laugh at you if you wore a mask.
Correct.
But you could tell that was where a decision was local or where a decision was not local.
Yep. And so I made the decision not to get it, and I was let go in October of 2021. And there was always something, I guess, in me that's somewhat of an entrepreneur, right? And
you always did weddings and DJing and stuff.
Yeah, I did all that. And it's funny you bring that up, because for me, I decided to launch Chris Logan Media, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but I also knew that I had X amount of weddings to DJ. So I'm thinking, okay, if I fall on my face in the next year, I at least know that I'm going to have some income coming in. So that wedding DJ thing and being booked a year and a half in advance, I knew I would have income. And that's somewhat of what pushed me into that decision of, okay, go and try it, see if you can do it, and you have the DJ thing to fall back on. And luckily, everything worked out. And now I have Chris Logan Media. Now the online station that I started is now an FM radio station. So I don't know at what point you want to jump into that or my whole timeline at Chris Logan Media, but that's how I got from the corporate media to now working on my own with my own Chris Logan Media company.
Okay. Well, I mean, but I guess the thing that I find fascinating, and maybe it's not as big of a deal as I think it is, but I would venture to guess that most people have no idea what's involved in taking a radio station from an internet streaming service to an FM broadcasted signal. How big a deal is that, and how good was that for you?
Well, it was great. And I was lucky that, because right now what I had, the online station, the Planet, turned into Planet Radio 106.7. So when I launched Chris Logan Media, I wanted to get into digital marketing, but I also wanted to get into the podcast space. And because podcasting was gaining popularity, and my big thing, I wanted to, one, have my own podcast, but number two, help other people with their podcast, producing it, publishing everything, which I'm still doing that for a good number of people now. But I wanted that to be the main focus. And then the main focus, when I launched the company, turned into social media management and digital marketing. Because when I went out on my own, I started doing some of that. Then words started to spread, and then people had supported my decision. And I had a lot of businesses coming to me, people that I had relationships with before, and then that took off more than I anticipated. So, which that was great. That was part of what I wanted to do, but it wasn't really the main focus. I'm like, man, there's no, and I did some research. There's podcast studios in major cities like, Jacksonville. They have a huge podcast studio there. Very cool, where people just come in. They have their own content. They record, somebody publishes it, edit, all the person or people or company, all they have to do is come in and talk. Everything else is taken care of. And that was what I wanted to do. I'm still doing some of that now, but just not as much as what I anticipated. Now, I knew that I wanted to start an online station. And me and a buddy of mine, who I used to work with at radio, he was the original program director of Planet Radio back in the day. We always talked about bringing Planet Radio back, or bringing that music back from the 90s and 2000s. Personally, I always thought, being a 48 going on 49-year-old person, that my music wasn't really anywhere on the radio. I dig the 80s, don't get me wrong. I grew up on the 80s, but it's like on mainstream radio, the 80s is really where it stopped. And you think about it, dude, the 90s, I graduated in 93. That was 31 years ago. 2004 was 20 years ago. And in radio, a classic was always considered a 20-year-old song, and
That's the radio station is the benefit of that. I've noticed, the wife and I binged a show from 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason you could tell it wasn't a modern show. The only reason was the monitors were bigger on the computers, and the cell phones were different.
Yep.
That was the only thing that's different. Nothing really has changed in 20 years. But if you go back 1980 versus 2000, radically different. And you go back years, 1960 versus 1980, it doesn't even, it looks like a different species of human beings. Then you go back to 1940, 20 years used to be revolutionary change. But now I'm probably part of the problem. I got a playlist, 800 songs on my phone. I don't listen to the radio that much.
Yeah.
And there's not a song on my playlist that is from this century.
Mm-hmm. No, it's
maybe
true.
One
It's
or two. We stopped evolving almost with music.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a shirt from 20 years ago and it doesn't look like
right. It doesn't, right. And I knew I wanted to start an online station because coming back to COVID, COVID sped up the evolution process. It really did. Piggly Wiggly and Church Point started curbside service. A lot of businesses had to find a way, and the hot word was pivot, but everybody had to find a way to pivot since brick and mortar stores were shut down. How can I make money? How can I do this? How can I keep my business going? Do I need to start an online portion? Like what do I need to do? And I saw that digital space really opening up, and I'm like, well, I feel that I could be on the forefront with that at Chris Logan Media. And radio, I'm not saying radio is going away right now. I think radio still in our area here in Acadiana, I think it's still viable. But radio has always been in a fight. Radio has been in a fight since cassettes and CDs and MTV and Sirius XM, and radio has always found a way to stay at the top of media, or somewhere towards the top. And it's like we're at a point now where, is radio as we knew it on frequencies going to go away? And that was always some conversation, even way back when apps and streaming started coming along. I remember our general manager at the time, and this was probably like 2008, and he was like, I'm telling y'all, man, it's going to be, in the future, we're not going to have frequency. It's going to be all these apps on the dashboards, and people are going to be punching their apps. And what's happening now? Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. You see a lot of radio taking that that streaming turn a little bit. And obviously, we still have the frequencies. You have TV stations, they're taking their platforms to more of the streaming side. And it's like eventually those frequencies are going to go away. I feel. Is it going to be tomorrow? No. But the future is going to be app-based streaming and app-based platforms. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can be on the forefront of that. I'll just go ahead and launch my own online station. So I decided to launch a station called The Planet, which was a nod to Planet Radio from back in the day. That was a station where I got my start back in 1999. And it was a station that it was back then was South Louisiana's new rock, but it was built on 90s rock. It was built on at that time, early 2000s rock whenever I worked there. And it was a very instrumental station, a very influential station too in the area. And it had went away, if my memory serves me right. I'm thinking 2017, maybe 2015, 2017, that brand went away. And so I knew I didn't want to call it Planet Radio because I didn't want it confused with being on the radio. So I'm like, I'll just call it The Planet, but because that was always a nickname for Planet Radio. People just called it The Planet. Hey, bro, listen to The Planet, bro. So when I launched that, it was a success from like.
Were there any trademark
right
or
no
problems with that?
No, there wasn't. Everything was given up by the company that had it. They hadn't renewed anything. So all of that was available, and there was somebody else who had purchased the name Planet Radio, and then now we have that. So there was really no issues with that. It was totally given up and not renewed. So that's where we are today. So
you have those trademarks and everything in place?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I wasn't the best student in law school, but I know that. You probably
yeah. So, and then so I had a lot of success with just the online station. There was people telling me, oh man, you can't have success with an online station and you can't make money. And these are some of the old radio guys. But for me, so when I started in radio, I started on air and I started in programming. And then I guess about 2015, 2016-ish, I was still on the air, but I also started on the sales side, on the sales and marketing side. So I'm pretty much well-versed in both, in programming and in sales. Obviously, I don't know everything. I'm still a firm believer in you can learn something new every day, which I try to do. But I knew I had all that knowledge, and I'm like, man, I can make this work. And I knew I had relationships, and dude, I launched it, like I sold it. I had advertising on there. Like I had every aspect of a radio station, but I was not on the radio.
I mirror that exact experience, not exact, but when I was, I worked in sales. I was in sales management, sales training for 20 years. Before that, and in a limited capacity after that, but before that, I was a sports photographer, which I got into out of necessity, and then I developed a love for it. And it's one of those things, you want to play, there's a hefty charge up front, because the equipment you need, nobody that takes pictures casually needs a $6,000 lens.
Right. Yeah.
You got to make money with it, or you can't have it.
Yeah. Yep.
Or you're insanely rich. So I made money with photography, and I did some cool stuff. I got to shoot I got to shoot multiple Super Bowls. I had Olympics in Atlanta. I shot
nice.
I got to be NBA, NFL. I traveled with the New Orleans Saints, which was great. I was a huge fan. I mean, it was like a dream. It paid literally nothing, but shame on them for not finding out that I would have done it for free. It was. But when I lost a sales job and I wasn't sure what I was going to do, I had been shooting a lot of youth things, and so I created a magazine, like a Sports Illustrated, but for local youth. So it was like high school and younger sports, but full color magazine. So it was like a print advertising. So I used my sales ability to sell the ads, and I didn't know how to write, and I was a salesperson. So it was like, in fact, I remember in my first issue, if you ever find it, you'll see my kids' names as the writer of some of the stories, because I thought it would be cheesy if every single story was written.
Was you?
But I sold every ad. I laid out every piece of copy. I wrote every story. I designed the ads for people who didn't have like a print ready ad. I did all of that stuff, and I was so proud of that magazine. I'm horrified by it today because like I learned a lot doing it, but I'm a firm believer that decisive action beats careful planning, at least at the initial stage, because you could have planned this radio station till the cows came home, and it probably wouldn't have had the same level of success as when you just did it and you weren't bothered by the fact that you didn't necessarily know every little thing.
Yeah.
I can completely relate to that. That is awesome.
Yep. And it's like, let's just go. You know, that was my attitude at the time. Like, let's just go. Like, let's just see if it works, and let's try it. And, you know, but I knew I had to make a little money back, because the platform that I use, like, I have to pay monthly. But the platform that I use, you know, they take care of ASCAP, BMI, they take care of all that stuff. So that was something that I didn't have to worry about, but it was still a costly monthly fee. So I was like, man, I have to sell sponsors at least to just try to make the money back. But then also I had thousands and thousands of downloads of the app. So I had also the data to back it up that people were listening. Now, look, I wasn't overcharging. I mean, it was very affordable. But I knew I had to make my money back. And then, so look, that was rolling, you know, the digital side of what I was doing, that was rolling too. And then in January, I get a call from a buddy of mine. I guess I could name drop him. I mean, he's been a local radio legend, Fast. And so I had worked at their group for a while back on Big 102.1.
Well, that was a job you left for the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so he said, hey, man, you want to meet? And I said, I'm not going back to work. And he's like, no. And I'm like, dude, it's like, I'm not. I'm like, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm seeing some success doing what I'm doing. I was like, I'm not going back to work for anybody. And he's like, no, man, that's not what I want to talk about. And I'm like, okay. And so we end up meeting, me, him, and Renee. And then we talked about putting The Planet, which is my streaming station, on their frequency 106.7. And so
we have a mutual friend that was a DJ on that station, and he was like, I'm getting booted off my
oh yeah
Eric Eric White.
Yeah,
we grew up in the same neighborhood. Like, we went to school together. We were friends like from third or fourth grade on.
Yeah, I remember him telling me that, man. He said that he knew you for a very long time. So we met and discussed it. And so again, what fell into or what played out for me was how we are executing the station. So in discussing what was going on, they wanted me to go to their studio and do everything there. And I said, I can't do that. And they just all looked at me and said, why? I'm like, well, one, I spent a lot of time building something for the past year and a half. And I said, I just can't give up on that. And so they were very receptive to that. And then number two, I had just bought a building. So I was renting an apartment from a buddy of mine, and that's where I had my studio and my office. I had got out my house. I had to get out my house. So I was renting that space from him. And then a building came up for sale in Church Point, and I ended up buying it. And
I was always under the impression that you just tricked out a part of your house.
No, dude, no. I was at an apartment. And but the building that I'm in now, it works out for me and my son. So my son has a barbershop in the front, and then I built out a studio in the back.
Got it.
So
okay, well, now I know exactly where it is.
yeah. So now we both use it, and I was able to kind of make it and construct it the way I wanted to. But then, I told him that as well. I'm like, I just closed on a building like last month. Like I just can't give all of this up that I've been doing. And the owner just looked at me and said, "What do you suggest?" And I said, "We do it from my studio." And
how much, I guess, programming creative control did you retain? Is it
all of it?
So you've got a frequency until they decide to kick you off the frequency, basically.
Correct. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Is there any equity in the brand or the station? Like, could you take it to another group?
Probably if I wanted to, yeah.
I know, no, I'm not suggesting you do.
I would really like, a goal would be to have it for myself. And actually own the frequency. So, that's a goal of mine. But, and then there was another thing too, because they wanted to get it on the air pretty quickly. And so I said, well, if we want to do this quickly, the quickest way to get this on the air is to let's do it from my studio. All I have to do is just change the sweepers in between the songs to say Planet Radio 106.7 instead of saying listen to the planet.
Well, your app still works. Now, I listened to your app the other day. Is that am I listening to the same?
It is.
Same
it is. Yep. And then so that, that was another thing too. And I said, look, I got thousands. I don't know, man. I think at the time I'd hit like 5,000 downloads on the app. And so when we were discussing all this, I said, again, I can't throw away what I built and talking about the planet, because I said, if you guys decide to say, no, we don't want to do this anymore, and we build a whole nother app and I go to your studio and all that stuff, and you pull the plug in a year, then all my work is gone. And so we formed a little partnership. I kept all the digital side. So everything that I had when I launched the planet is all still the same. So it's still listentotheplanet.com, to listen to the Planet app, all that stuff stayed the same. And then it's Planet Radio 106.7. So we just I have everything here. We have this little box that we transmit the signal from here to their studio. It goes out over the air. And that's what happens on a daily basis. Yeah.
So, but it's the same commercials, like you said. You're not selling separate digital commercials for the app that aren't necessary.
Yeah, no. I mean, and there, so like we can, let's say if there's an advertiser that also wants to be on the stream, like we can add that commercial in on the stream as well.
But it's not automatically on the stream.
Not automatically, no.
Okay.
Nope.
Because I was listening to the app and I was like, man, things must not be good. I haven't heard an ad in 45 minutes.
Yeah. No, it's and then actually, so we only run 2 commercial breaks an hour. So I mean, which is good for now. But the the app itself and the streaming, it's somewhat geo-targeted. So when we're in a commercial break here, it kicks off a commercial break also on the stream. But the platform that I use, they also sell that inventory. So when we go to a commercial here, you may hear like a Home Depot commercial, or you may hear like a Hispanic Kroger commercial or something like that.
Right.
Just depending. And then there's sometimes, if you're using a VPN, then you're just gonna hear the filler that I have. But they're both rolling, and all the online stuff is still mine. And obviously the frequency is still theirs. But we formed a little partnership, and we're getting it done.
That is awesome. I'm excited about it. I mean, I was thinking, about, and I've got exposure all over the country. I was working, I was a CEO for law firms in 30 different law firms in all 50 states, because they would rotate every 12 months. And I have, I've got exposed to some pretty crazy individuals, some pretty interesting stories. And so I'm lining up my people I'm kind of target to, inappropriate growth. I mean, that's, And what I mean by it's inappropriate growth, one, because I had a reputation in networking. I was in a B&I group. And when I was in that B&I group, I did the education moments. And when I did those moments, I always thought that was the most boring part of a B&I meeting. And how can I spice that up? And so what I was constantly doing is bringing in kind of risque topics, or maybe pushing the appropriateness envelope, waiting for the leadership team to say, Paul, can we tone it down a bit? And they never did. So I just pushed it a little further and pushed it a little further till eventually people were visiting our chapter just to hear what I was going to say in these educational moments. We even had a visit from the president of BNI who heard about him. And he actually said, everything they said about you is true. I agree. I think you're always informative and you're sometimes appropriate. And so like I used that intro. I loved it. And then I do business growth with clients, and I've told clients they're probably not a good fit because I'm kind of obsessed with growth. If your goals are not to grow and expand or in some way, we're not going to get along. I'm going to get bored fast with what you're doing because you don't need to change anything if you don't want to grow. So I remember getting introduced to someone, and they told them, this is Paul. Paul has an inappropriate relationship with growth. And so those two things were on my mind. And when I got convinced to do a podcast, I thought inappropriate growth. I like it. So before I even said it out loud, I saw if I could get the URL. And I got it. It was available.
Really?
So I got it and I immediately did it. Now, later, when I was talking to someone in the podcast realm, they said, hey, you know that inappropriate is misspelled? I'm like, oh, no, don't tell me that. I had two N's and one P instead of one N and two P.
Okay.
I misspelled it.
Oh, damn.
And I was like, oh, crap. I based everything on the fact that I could get the URL. Well, luckily, the correct spelled URL was available also. So I corrected that, and now
And you
I
still
have
it.
I have the misspelled version for 3 years, I think, is what I prepaid for.
Yeah.
But it was really
your domain.
I started out like a Facebook group. This morning I crossed 100 members. Really excited.
Nice.
Inappropriate growth on Facebook. And it's really, I'm trying to kind of create a community of people, mostly business owners, some salespeople or contract workers, but people who might share tips and tricks about growth.
Yep.
The podcast is about people. I want to hear the stories, what did they do? And sometimes it's a disproportionate amount of work, and disproportionate, inappropriate, tomato.
Yeah.
It worked. But that's where I got the idea. But I talk to a lot of potential clients who will say, I want to know, why are you starting this business? Why are you going out on your own? Well, they'll say something like, well, I want to be my own boss. I don't want to work on Fridays. Or they'll say stuff like that. And I'm like, why do you think this is possible? And they'll say, well, my good friend has owned his own business for 20 years. And he doesn't work on Fridays, and he leaves every day after lunch.
Ding, ding, ding. That's the key. 20
All right. Well, here's let's I think you're comparing your chapter 1 to their happily ever after.
Yep.
I'd be more interested in what were the first 6 months of going out on their own like for them. I want to hear the stories of sleeping on the floor and not knowing if you're going to eat, and working 7 days a week, and with no promise of anything. Those are the kind of the stories that I'm interested in on the podcast. I mean, yes, hooray. Now you're the douche with the Lamborghini. I get it. And you don't look like you're doing anything. But there was a lot of work that went into getting to that status or that position. And I'm much more interested in that. Look, go listen to my podcast. See how many of those people were taking Fridays off and not working afternoons from day one.
Yeah. Not many, man.
No.
And the funny thing is, and I joke around with people, people who take the leap or start their own company, whatever it is, and you hear that, oh man, it must be nice. Like, dude, you don't even know. You don't even know. Like, and for me, it's different because obviously, and again, it all comes back to a choice that I made, right? I made the choice to have my own business. I made the choice to, on top of what I was doing, to take on Planet Radio. Like, I made that choice. I put myself in this place to work 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like it was a choice that I made. And dude, it's a tough choice for some people, man. It doesn't come overnight.
Entrepreneurial, it's almost like a chromosome or a gene. Not everybody can do it because it takes, and it's not necessarily good that you have this gene because
no.
some entrepreneurs just can't get a break and they're miserable working for someone else. But what you have to accept is, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. That typically, in my experience, that means you're going to leave a 40-hour-a-week job with a guaranteed income that's relatively consistent. And you're going to replace it with a 60 to 80-hour job with no guarantees and certainly less money.
Yep.
When you present it to them like that, do you still want to be a business owner? If they say yes, then there's a good chance that they have that gene or that skill set or that willingness to motivate themselves to push through what everyone around them is thinking you've lost your mind.
Yeah. I mean, it would. I mean, a lot of this stuff, and not just me, but dude, it would break most people. I mean, it would break most people. I mean, I was already putting in long hours to get things started, and then when I took over the station and had all that responsibility, I started doing the morning show again. So that means that I'm up at 5 or before 5, and the morning show starts at 6, and then I'm on the air until 10. So like, okay, there's my radio stuff. And then, okay, oh, wait, I still got some radio stuff, but then I got all my Chris Logan media stuff. And so I bit off a lot. And my thing now is, just finding people to help me on the Chris Logan media side. And I'm starting to dial into that. That way I'm managing a little of that, and then also managing the Planet Radio side, because I'm also selling Planet Radio as well. So that's a whole nother animal there to try to get advertisers on the station. And I can't do it 8 hours a day, but I try. So
you have multiple 8-hour-a-day jobs.
Yeah. So my biggest thing now, and sometimes it drives me crazy, is balance. How do I balance it out? What do I give to Planet during the day? What do I give to Chris Logan Media during the day? There's this day is all my Planet Radio meetings. On that day is all my Chris Logan Media meetings. What do I do? Then I look at my phone and it's 8:00 at night. It's
but the uncertainty and the fear and the not knowing if you were going to have enough money to eat today, that problem's probably solved.
Yeah, no, yeah.
You replaced it with another problem.
Yeah.
And that's a business owner.
Yep. To me, you're replacing a problem with a problem. There's always something else to solve and get done. But again, I thoroughly enjoy it. I mean, I guess there's somewhat of I guess I kind of thrive on it. I like,
I will say bullshit if you say you don't enjoy doing a morning show. That would be a lie.
No, you have to enjoy doing a morning show. You
I can
really
tell
do.
you like that.
Because and I thoroughly enjoy that. I really do. But that's dude, I mean, you just think I get to work at 5. By the time the show is over, let's just say at 10, that's all right. That's already a 5-hour day. Noon, when it's quote unquote lunchtime, I'm already 7-8 hours into my day, and I'm really just getting started.
Well, and this came up to me recently. And back when I was in college, I was a full-time student. I worked 40 hours a week at my dad's restaurant. I would spend the days in the kitchen and the nights waiting tables or bartending. And I was also managing. My grandmother had a couple of fourplexes in Carencro, and I could live in one if I managed it. And manage it basically meant mow the grass, call the plumber if there's a leak, collect the rent, deposit the rent, clean out the apartments if one got empty and make sure it got filled. It wasn't a 40-hour job, but Sometimes it was Sunday night at midnight.
Mhm.
You know, it was 24 hours. You know, I was the on-site person. I also was a columnist for the school newspaper. I was editor of the yearbook. I was active in student government. I was doing all of these things at a high level. Then I graduated and I got a job, you know, a salaried sales job.
Mhm.
And I got fired less than 8 months because I couldn't get to work on time some days and I wasn't consistent. I had one thing to do. I'm coming
Yeah,
from
your
the
brain
state
just didn't work.
where I
that
had
way.
all
Yeah.
these other things to do. And it dawned on me earlier today when I was having this conversation is that what I had to do out of necessity was plan, be organized, hold myself accountable. And I worked at Paul's P Rogue Cajun restaurant for 10 years. Not one single time was I ever late.
Mhm.
Not one single time did I call in sick. Not one single time did I miss work. Ever, ever, never. It didn't happen. But I had a schedule around meetings with the yearbook and the newspaper, and I had class, you know, sometimes, especially when you're getting close to graduating, like, oh, this class is only at 5:30 in the afternoon. It's like, what the F? No, I got to go to work. Can't do that. Well, so having to plan at that level with all these different balls in the air, I found them much more productive.
Mhm.
And when I took the job 3 years ago, actually, I took it a couple of months before you left KSMB.
Mm.
I was working 60 hours a week. I mean, with no breaks. I was a CEO for 30 law firms and I was on Zoom all day, every day, no lunch for sure. Sometimes I couldn't go to the bathroom. Like I joked about modifying my chair so that I wouldn't have to leave the Zoom call to use the restroom. But what I started doing, I got really, really militant. Your cousin and I, Dawn, we would go to the
Mhm.
gym every day at 5:15 every day. I'm not a meathead. Like I work out 15 minutes tops. I'm very focused. I don't talk to
Mhm.
anybody. I come home. We've got a bunch of large animals now at my house. I go through a 30-minute process of feeding all of them. And if you've ever been in a barn, everything weighs 50 pounds. So
Yeah.
my workout kind of
You're working out there too. Yeah.
But when I was done, I would vigorously wash my hands. It's two good things that came out of COVID. We learned how to wash our hands, number one, and number two, our minds were opened to the concept of remote work.
Yeah.
Those are the two positives that came out of COVID. I've finished washing my hands, fixed my hair, put on a clean shirt. I still get jokes when I go to the cleaners. They're like, "Mr. Paul, do you not wear pants?" I'm like, no point. I mean, I wear pants. I'm not bottomless, but I'm not spending $4 for you to wash them.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting at my desk ready to work at 6 a.m. or
Mhm.
6:15 at the latest. And
Mhm.
I needed that because I had my first call, which was, you know, I needed an agenda for it that started at 7, someone on the East Coast that it was there 8 o'clock. And I had people on the West Coast. I would work sometimes till 6 or 7 at night, 5 days a week, but never missed a call, never didn't fix a conflict, always got that done. But it was because I had too much to do rather than not enough. So I could totally see where as you're piling on, you're actually turning into a more effective, efficient version of yourself.
Yeah, it's weird the way it works out. It's almost like organized chaos, I guess, you know? It's you just have to find a way to get it done.
Yeah, and you're not conscious of what you did right, but you know something worked.
Mhm. A lot of people ask me how I do it. I was like, man, like they say, how do you do everything that you do? And my answer is, I don't know. I I don't know. I just do it. I
Well,
mean,
I know a lot of
day
people
in
that
and
work
day out, I just do
work
it.
offshore, work in construction, and when I always ask them, they would say, "Well, it's two things. I go home, that's my sanctuary from work, and then I go to work because that's my sanctuary from
From
home."
home.
So the secret is to have, you know, a miserable job and a miserable home life, and then you can, man, there's no end to what you
Boom,
can't
boom,
do.
boom.
Well, Chris,
Oh
I really,
man.
really appreciate. I love your story. I'm hoping that other people benefit from hearing it, and who knows? But tell us if anybody wants to get in touch with you because you need more stuff to
More
do.
stuff to do. I'm willing to take on more
That'll
stuff.
have a 7-second delay.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to the station, if you want to listen to the station, it's Planet Radio 106.7. The website's listentotheplanet.com. And the app, you go to the App Store, Google Play, search Listen to the Planet, and it's 90s and 2000s rock. And I've been dabbling a little bit in some newer rock, because I feel there is a little rock resurgence. I mean, there's some resurgence with 20-year-olds that are listening to Godsmacks and 30 Seconds to Mars and Creed and Nickelback, even though they weren't like back in the day. There's a resurgence with those bands. So there's some of that coming back. And then also a lot of bands from back in the day, they're releasing new music too. Like
touring.
Yeah. I mean, we just had Fuel at the Cajun Heartland State Fair. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I never understood. I mean, I heard there was band trouble, but I just thought that was the most complete band when they came out. I loved their entire initial album. It was great. And
so
then
I mean, dude, 311 put out new music the other week. Offspring got new stuff. Smashing Pumpkins got new stuff. So the new stuff that we play, the new rock that we play, it's I call it new rock from Planet Radio artists. So I'm not gonna play random mulberry tree that comes out with a new song, but if it's established Planet Radio bands and they come out with new music, then we're gonna play it on the station. So that's radio wise how you can listen. For me, you can find Chris Logan on social media, and my direct number anytime anybody wants to reach out. And look, if you want to talk about marketing, or if you want to talk about digital marketing, you want to talk about having your own podcast, whatever it is, 337-581-6884.
All right. Well, there you have it. Chris Logan, the epitome of inappropriate growth.
Well, I thank you for having me on.
Family members I chose.
Yeah.
You're marrying someone, you're marrying a whole slew of people.
You get it all.
Right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. And I wish you all the luck, and I will continue listening.
Thank you, man. You're welcome. And good luck with your podcast as well.
All right. Thanks.